Thanks for joining us for another edition of The Small Business Show with Jim Fitzpatrick, exclusively on ASBN.com.
Hey everyone, Jim Fitzpatrick. Thanks so much for joining me this morning. What if chasing goals is actually holding us back? On today's show, we are exploring the downside of our obsession with metrics and what you can do to avoid some of the pitfalls. Joining us now is Sébastien Page, who's a Fortune 500 executive and author of his latest book, The Psychology of Leadership, just what we need right now. He's also been seen on CNBC and Bloomberg TV, but now he's ready for our channel after being on those smaller channels. So just kidding, Sébastien. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. Very much appreciate it. I should also mention that you're the head of Global Multi-Asset and Chief Investment Officer at Rowe Price. So you're probably fielding a lot of phone calls these days of consumers and your customers that are a little uncertain about things out there. But I guess that's a whole nother show, because we want to really delve into your new book and talk about The Psychology of Leadership, which is an incredible book. We're going to show you on the screen here, we're showing you a copy of it. There's also a link right below this video for you to get your copy, which we highly recommend. So I'll let you kind of take it from there. Introduce the concept to us of goal-induced blindness. What does that mean?
First of all, Jim, I feel like I'm in the big leagues right now. I'm super happy to be with you.
Well, thank you.
Look, I'm going to say first that metrics and measurable goals are important. They matter, they're motivating, and they work really well in business. And I know you have a lot of business leaders in your audience.
That's right.
But I'm going to say this, and this is what I talk about in The Psychology of Leadership. Most of us leaders underestimate goal-induced blindness, which is well documented in the research in psychology. Jim, goal-induced blindness means that you're so focused on your goal, your quarterly revenues, for example,
right,
that you lose sight of everything else.
Yeah.
It could be your personal health. It could be your relationships at home.
Yep.
It could be, your sense of ethics and following the rules.
Oh, yeah.
So it's dangerous. It's real. It's well documented. The example psychologists like to use, Jim, is deaths on Mount Everest. Because if you want to summit Mount Everest, you have a 4% chance of dying. There's a lot of goal-induced blindness there.
Wow. There's people that are going up there are literally stepping over people that didn't make it either up or back down, right?
Yeah, because it's hard to remove
Yeah, it's a very, very unfortunate situation. But we do that same scenario in business often. We'll lose good associates and good employees, good team members, because all we can see is that goal ahead of us, and we don't even take time with some of the greatest people that we've been working with to either show appreciation or listen to them or have empathy, right? And that's something we see.
Yeah, and Jim, again, the measurable goals are important, but I'll give you an example. Like, there's a bit of a crisis around goal-induced blindness right now. I was speaking to about 1,000 university students 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And I asked them, if I give you a jar of gummies and 4 of them are poisoned, meaning you have a 4% chance of dying, and I challenge you to eat one for $1 million, would you do it? And I had about 15% of the room raise their hand.
Wow.
That's another example of goal-induced blindness. And there are ways to avoid this. Yeah. You need to get the feedback from your consumer. You need to know what's going on in the marketplace. You need to see where you're slipping and losing sight. And as an executive, and I'm appealing to everyone who watches your show, we all need to get better at quitting. Quitting is a skill. It's a highly underrated leadership skill. Even if you've invested much in that project and it's hard to leave it, most of the time you're better off investing for the future, not continuing based on past investments in the project. It's super difficult.
Well, you got to dive down into that a little bit further, because there's probably a lot of leaders right now that just said, "Did he say quitting?" So talk to me about that. What do you mean? If you're working on a project that's not going right, or walk me through that.
It sounds super counterintuitive, right? We think leaders need to just stick to it and get it done, and especially entrepreneurs and small business, like, never give up.
Right.
But you know what? Annie Duke, she's a famous author, and she endorsed my book, so I like giving her a lot of credit for this idea. Sure. She studied decision-making under uncertainty, And she realized that a lot of times it's better to switch, to abandon the project for something more profitable, or to reinvent your firm, to reinvent your business if markets conditions have changed. And look, business leaders are good at embracing change.
Right.
But collectively, and the research shows this, we're just not very good at quitting. Going back to my Everest example, 4% chance of dying if you want to summit Everest.
Yeah.
Well, there's someone has a world record. He's climbed 30 times.
Oh my God.
So there are people who are really good at risk taking, but they also, you know what differentiates those that do well climbing Everest repeatedly?
What's that?
They know when to quit.
Yeah.
They know when to abandon the summit.
That's right. And sometimes it's so hard for individuals that feel like, well, I'm invested so much into this, I'm going to see it through, right? And that's what gets us.
Think about, Netflix selling CDs over mail. Okay, they were doing really well, and they had invested in the infrastructure.
That's right.
To sell the movies via, it's not CDs, but via that old school technology that you mail.
Yeah, that's right.
And they had to quit doing that, even though they had invested a lot in that, and go to streaming.
That's right.
And that's difficult. I see it in my world. I see it everywhere. Sure. Leaders have to look at what they've invested for sure, but look at the future, not the past.
That's right. That's right. What's the risk for companies, especially in competitive sectors, perhaps like automotive or real estate or insurance, when leadership becomes too outcome focused?
So I want to say, again, outcomes are important.
Yeah.
Go ahead and focus on outcomes, measure them. That's motivating. It helps you run the business.
Right.
You're a leader, you need to set the goals. If you don't set the goals for your business, who will?
Right.
But at the same time, and I'm going to use an example in the automotive business, firms sometimes just go astray. They just go in the wrong direction just for the goal. They get firms, world-class firms, get goal-induced blindness. Jim, why would Volkswagen, a world-class company in that sector, go and start cheating their emissions testing?
Yep.
Why? It's just like you have, Wells Fargo creating dummy bank accounts.
Right. All focused on hitting a goal.
Yeah. And if you want it, and it's the same, I study sports psychology in the psychology of leadership. It's a big part of what I want to bring to running companies and managing teams and people and managing yourself. And in sports psychology, there's also goal-induced blindness. There's some athletes that just completely burn out. And so taking care of yourself, taking care of your employees, it's all part of being a high-performing organization.
Yeah, no question. How should business owners and executives redefine success with this in mind?
So success has to be measurable, but remember that a lot of your goals, this is the one idea I want to leave with you and your audience. Some of your goals are not going to be measurable. And in the psychology of leadership, I invite leaders to think about process, a mastery orientation. Say you run an automotive factory, you're building a part, right? It's important, the output per month and so on. Some of your goals should be process improvement. Yeah. Getting better, more efficient at producing the parts. And for us, in money management, it's improving our research process to uncover ideas, improving the communication between the investors so we get better ideas to make money for our clients. So some of the goals have to be not measurable, and they have to be focused on this idea of mastery. Jim, the idea is that a golfer should absolutely care about the score and their handicap, but they should get really excited if they can improve their swing. And one of their goals should be, I'm going to improve my swing.
It's a very good point. Yeah, that's a very good point, because so many of us are focused just on hitting, the ball in the cup, that we don't focus, to your point, on the process of getting there. Right.
That's it. You nailed it. Hit the nail on the head. That's exactly the idea. It applies to all kinds of businesses. In psychology, it's described as a mastery mindset, which is different from an ego mindset. By the way, I'm going to say I have an ego. We all have an ego mindset.
We all have an ego mindset. Yes.
We all want to win. We all want to score. We all want to win.
That's right.
And that's perfectly okay. But you need to bring some mastery orientation into your business and whatever endeavor you do in life.
It's really part of getting your ego in check and getting it under control. That's what it sounds like to me, right? So that you're not just so focused on hitting that goal at all costs, whether it costs you employees or it costs you other customers or whatever you've got on the line there. And I've worked with people like that, which is frightening at times. And people say, "Oh, he or she is such a driven executive. They're so driven. They're goal oriented. They're driven." But they don't tell you about all the other things that go along with that, right? Not necessarily a fun person to work with.
And Jim, one more thing: it makes you to have a mastery focus makes you more resilient, because as Roger Federer said, whatever game you play in life, and especially in business, sometimes you're going to lose.
That's right.
You're going to have bad moments. You're going to have setbacks. If you have a mastery orientation, you become more resilient.
Yeah.
Roger Federer went viral a few weeks ago when he said, I have played 1,500 matches in my career. I've won 80% of them. He was speaking to students.
Right.
And then, Jim, he said, I've only won 54% of my points.
Wow.
So
there you go.
World class, one of the best tennis players of all time.
That's right.
Small edge. And then Federer said, whatever game you play in life, you're going to lose.
Yeah.
And learn to lose and learn from losing. That's part of the mastery mindset.
When we have those losses, what is it? We just focus on that for the next 30 days, don't we? We focus on the loss rather than learning to embrace the loss and move on quickly, right?
And the more you're ego-oriented, the more the loss is going to hurt.
That's right.
And I think over time, you're just going to be less productive. For me, it was a huge, I have a pretty stressful job, right?
Yeah.
So I was kind of beating myself up for being a little bit stressed at work. But at the same time, once I looked into sports psychology, first of all, you think athletes don't get stressed?
Yeah,
they
of course.
Absolutely do.
Yeah.
I talked to a sports psychologist, and he said, like, all pro athletes are neurotic. It's difficult, it's stressful.
Right.
But they frame it into excitement, into a fuel for performance. So for myself, was huge discovery as I was writing the book and digging into the research.
Sure. What drove you to write the book? What was the motivation behind writing the book?
Jim, I love to write, but at the time I was struggling at work. And it started with a conversation with a sports psychologist. His name is Dr. Daniel Zimmett. Really interesting person. He also happens to be a pro athlete. He does the research and supports elite athletes, but himself has mastered his mindset.
Yeah.
That was when I started getting interested in psychology for the positive side of it.
Right.
The book doesn't talk about clinical psychology, which is a huge deal, especially nowadays.
Sure.
It doesn't cover that. It covers the positive side, positive psychology, sports psychology, and some personality psychology as well.
Right. Yeah, that's fantastic. Hey, I would be remiss if I didn't ask the Chief Investment Officer at Rowe Price about this situation in D.C. It's got everybody going crazy right now with tariffs. Are we going to be all right?
So I'm going to try to answer that question without using the word uncertainty, because I actually looked in the media, and I don't know, Jim, how often you've said it on your show over the last few
unbelievable
weeks.
Right.
But there's actually data that shows that the word in the financial and global media has never been mentioned so often. Look, we're not panicking when markets sell off like this.
Yeah.
Usually it's a good time to look for opportunities. At the moment, we're sitting at neutral because we think you could actually get a market counter rally.
Okay.
But it could also get worse really quickly.
Yeah.
And so being close to neutral, where you want to be long-term, not panicking, staying invested, staying diversified.
Sure.
Over time, things will work out. American companies will adjust and adapt, and we'll be fine. So let's all show a bit of stress resilience through this time. Easier said than done, I'm aware.
That's right. And you only lose when you sell, right? So, so maybe don't sell.
Well, look. When the market is down, historically, you can look at the data, do the studies. When markets crash like this, it's usually not the right time to sell, at least based on historical data.
That's right. It'll come back. Look at what we learned through COVID, where everything just crashed for a little while, and then bingo, it came right back stronger than ever, right?
Yep.
It could be another situation like that. So, Sébastien Page, thank you so much for stopping by. Again, the book is The Psychology of Leadership. I highly recommend that you get your hands on it. If you're in business, you lead a team, you want to lead a team, you're being led by somebody in your company, this is the book you want to get your hands on to become a better leader yourself. So, Sébastien, thank you so much for joining me on the show. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of The Small Business Show with Jim Fitzpatrick, exclusively on ASBN.com.